Dr. David Kaiser here again for Pentecost 1830 in Scotland, the course on the Irvingite revival. The subject of this particular video is, how can somebody wholeheartedly embrace something as an act of God and then turn around and reject the entire thing? Thomas Erskine of Llanlathen was a Scottish laird. By that it means he was a wealthy landowner. His older brother had been the laird of Llanlathen, but he died and it fell to Thomas Erskine to be the laird, and so he quit working. He was a retired nobleman, so to speak, and he followed the Irvingite revival from the time he heard about it with great zeal, wrote about it, was interviewed by other people about it, was just simply enamored with it, the return of the gifts of the Spirit to the church and to the Church of Scotland, no less. But then later, he took it all back. So the question is why? Some of us have seen this in the charismatic movement as well in our lifetimes. Erskine took back his endorsement of the manifestations because he saw a lot of immaturity among the people that were involved in the revival. He was looking for the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, faith, gentleness, goodness, long-suffering, meekness, and self-control. Instead, there were the gifts of the Spirit, the 9 gifts put forth in 1 Corinthians 12, and among the most controversial one was prophecy, which usually happens. Healings, he could handle healings. They're by the grace and mercy of God. Tongues, especially as a devotional language for the individual Christian, didn't give him too much trouble. Of course, he was all for the word of wisdom, the word of knowledge, faith, other gifts that were manifested during the revival, interpretation of tongues, miracles. He was all for them. But when he saw people that were supposedly manifesting these gifts acting petty and childlike, childish probably would be a better word, and arguing with each other, and the early death of Irving, riding in a horse in the rain till he caught pneumonia and died, trying to do something about settling the squabbles, he decided then that the gifts and the manifestations were not genuine. Now, there's only one problem with this. If you read 1 Corinthians, which is probably the most out of order, childish church that Paul had to deal with, as far as we can tell from his letters, he tells them in the very first chapter that they come behind in no spiritual gift. Then he has to deal with the fact that they get drunk at communion. They have sexual incest with people they shouldn't be having sex with. They sue one another in civil court. The meetings are out of order. In other words, it's just pandemonium. And so Paul straightens them out on these things. That's why 1 Corinthians was written, is because the Corinth church was childish. And but he tells them at the very first, you got lots of spiritual gifts, but now you need to grow up. So the problem is in thinking that the bestowal of spiritual gifts in the charismatic or Pentecostal sense on people is a reward for being mature and having a lot of fruit in their lives. It is not. It is a gift from God. They are gifts from God that are meant to be practiced in a loving fellowship where they give way to each other, where they defer to each other, where they seek the wisdom of God as a group, where they have mature leadership. And the thing is that God doesn't mind for a certain amount of time a bunch of bratty kids. He knows they're going to be this way, but they need to grow up, and Paul makes it clear they need to grow up. So rejecting the manifestations because they're not exhibiting the maturity is a mistake on Erskine's part. It doesn't deny the fact that pandemonium reigns in these services sometimes. But it does say that God is more lenient in letting his children find their way and grow up than other people are, especially good, decent folk. They will be very hard. Or educated folk. I've watched this whole movement over a period of decades. I've got more education theologically than anyone else I know with 5 earned degrees, including a PhD from the oldest Presbyterian divinity school in the world, St. Andrews. And yet I see and have seen some real silliness. So I have some videos in here while I talk to other pastors about gifts and how the gifts are a gift from God. They're good. They can be used wrongly. They can be counterfeited without actually any malicious intent. And so this all has to be taken into account in order that we come to the place where we follow the teachings of Paul and grow in our faith, as well as have gifts that are operative in our lives. So this section is called Endorsements Given and Withdrawn. And this is my comment on it. If you are in a church that's mixed as far as people with gifts, these kind of gifts, and people without, I say that those who are looking at those who have them, pray for them. Pray for them to grow and mature. I say to those who have them or believe they do, looking at those who don't, saying, well, if they are Christians, if they've received Jesus, they're your brother and sister, and you shouldn't bulldoze them or treat them wrongly. Keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace until we all come to a unity of faith and knowledge in the Son of God. That's Paul. And that's the way it should go. God bless you.